So tonight, when you sit on your couch and flick a simple rubber band across the room, take a moment to look closely at your hands. You're not just playing with a cheap piece of flexible rubber. You are repeating an ancient cognitive ritual that rescued your ancestors from the brink of physical extinction. You are bending the laws of physics to your will, releasing stored potential energy, and striking an imaginary target from a safe distance without taking a single step. All because an ancient mind dared to realize that the most powerful weapon in the world was not a bigger muscle, but an invisible force waiting patiently inside a bent stick. Right now, you can sit on your couch, flick a simple rubber band across the room, and completely ignore the physical miracle you just performed. You stored muscle energy inside a flexible object, bent the laws of physics to your will, and struck a target from a safe distance without taking a single step. It feels simple. It feels like common sense. But the real answer is far stranger, because for nearly 2 million years, no brain on Earth could comprehend what you just did. Your ancient ancestors spent hundreds of thousands of generations trapped in a terrifying, close-quarters physical struggle. They walked upright. They carried heavy wooden spears. They had to look massive, dangerous predators directly in the eyes just to secure a single meal. To hunt a deer or defend against a hungry hyena, your ancestor had to run up and physically jam a sharpened stick in a thick hide. Imagine the sheer terror of that interaction. You feel the hot breath of the beast. You feel the violent shockwave travel up your arms. You risk severe injury or broken bones with every single hunt. How did your species escape this brutal physical arms race? How did a slow, hairless primate figure out how to project deadly force across hundreds of feet of open air? You might assume that one brilliant ancient human simply picked up a bent stick, tied a piece of string to it, and changed human history overnight. But evolution rarely works in sudden flashes of solitary genius. The invention of the bow and arrow was not a simple discovery. It was a massive cognitive revolution that required your ancestors to synthesize multiple, completely unrelated technologies into a single deadly device. To understand how your brain achieved this, you have to look at the sheer difficulty of ancient survival. For a long time, the best weapon available was a handheld thrusting spear. It was effective, but it forced your ancestors to stay within arm's reach of sharp teeth and crushing jaws. Eventually, early humans made a subtle upgrade. They learned to throw spears through the air. Throwing a spear increased distance and safety, but it introduced a brand new physical problem. Human arms are limited by biological mechanics. No matter how strong your ancestor was, a thrown wooden spear loses speed and kinetic energy quickly. It requires heavy muscle mass. It demands precision timing. Can you imagine relying on pure shoulder power to feed your hungry family every single night in the dead of winter? To fix this mechanical bottleneck, your ancestors eventually invented the spear thrower, often called an atlatl. This was a notched wooden stick that effectively lengthened the human lever arm, allowing a hunter to leverage more rotational speed and throw a light dart much farther. It was a brilliant physical hack. Yet even the spear thrower had massive structural limitations. You had to stand up fully erect to throw it. You needed wide, unobstructed space to swing your arm overhead. If you were crouching in thick brush or hiding behind a low rock, the sweeping movement of your shoulder would instantly give away your position. The animal would bolt before the dart ever left your fingertips. Human survival was stuck at a frustrating threshold. What your ancestors truly needed was a weapon that required almost zero physical body movement to trigger. They needed a weapon that could store kinetic power inside an inanimate object, holding that energy patiently until the exact microsecond you decided to release it. They had to invent the concept of stored invisible energy. Have you ever wondered what kind of brain is capable of imagining something that cannot be seen with the human eye? Archaeologist Murli Lombard conducted extensive excavations at Sabudu Cave in South Africa, unearthing layers of ancient soil that hold the secret to this profound transition. Deep within these prehistoric sediments, dated to over 64,000 years ago, Lombard discovered tiny quartz and stone points. These were not heavy spearheads meant for a thick wooden pole. They were far too small and delicate. When examined under high-powered microscopes, these microliths revealed distinct micro-wear patterns at their tips and micro-residues of ancient composite glue at their bases. The glue was a complex chemical concoction made from tree resin, plant gum, and red ochre, cooked over a carefully regulated fire. This discovery rocked the global scientific community. It proved that tens of thousands of years ago, human hunting technology had already gone microscopic. Your ancestors were no longer just sharpening large rocks. They were manufacturing tiny, standardized stone arrowheads and chemically bonding them to lightweight wooden shafts. But having tiny arrowheads is only half the mechanical puzzle. How did they come up with the bow itself? Cognitive archaeologist Miriam Hadel has studied the mental architecture required to build a bow, and her findings reveal something astonishing about the structure of your mind. Making a basic stone hand axe requires a few sequential steps. You find a rock, you hit it with another rock, and you stop when the edge is sharp. It is a direct cause and effect loop. But constructing a functional bow and arrow is entirely different. It requires what scientists call secondary tool-making and delayed mental loops. Think about the sheer number of completely separate elements your ancestor had to gather and process. First, you must select a specific hardwood branch that is flexible enough to bend without snapping, yet springy enough to return violently to its original shape. Second, you must hunt an animal or gather plant fibers, process the sinew or raw material into delicate threads, and braid them together to form a high-tensile cord. Third, you must harvest tree sap and mineral pigments, boiling them into a durable adhesive. Fourth, you must track a bird, harvest its feathers, and split them down the middle to create fletching for aerodynamic flight stabilization. Fifth, you must carve a straight wooden shaft and notch it perfectly at both ends to seat the bowstring and the arrowhead. None of these individual items looks like a weapon on its own. A piece of string does nothing. A bent branch does nothing. A bird feather does nothing. If you show a bowstring to an untrained mind, it sees a harmless piece of cordage. It takes a radical structural shift in human consciousness to hold all these separate pieces in your mind simultaneously, knowing that when combined, they will create an invisible physical force. How did your ancestors bridge this massive mental gap between raw materials and lethal kinetic force? The answer likely lies in everyday survival tasks that had nothing to do with warfare or hunting. Before the bow was a weapon, its components existed in completely different daily contexts. Your ancestors were already using flexed wooden saplings to create spring-loaded snares for trapping small game in the forest. They saw how a bent branch under physical tension snaps back with violent speed when tripped by a hidden lever. They were also using braided cordage to bundle firewood, tie leather clothing, or construct temporary wilderness shelters. At some point, an observant mind noticed the subtle interaction between tension, wood flexibility, and cordage. When you pull a stretched cord tied between the two ends of a curved stick, the wood stores potential elastic energy. When you release your fingers, that stored energy transfers instantly into whatever object is resting against the center of the string. Experimental archaeologist Metin Aaron has demonstrated through rigorous mechanical testing that early bows transformed human hunting efficiency not just through power, but through pure energy transfer efficiency. A human arm throwing a heavy spear wastes a tremendous amount of physical energy simply moving the heavy bones and muscles of the arm itself. A bow, however, acts as a biological mechanical amplifier. It allows your small finger muscles to slowly load potential energy into the wooden stave over several seconds, storing that force safely inside the grain of the wood, and then releasing that accumulated power in a fraction of a millisecond. You are essentially tricking the physical laws of nature into doing the heavy lifting for you. This mechanical advantage transformed the human body from a brute force battering ram into a precision launch platform. Have you ever considered how much of your modern technology works on this exact same principle of stored potential? Consider what this technological shift changed for your ancestors on a deep psychological level. Before the bow, hunting was an intense, high-adrenaline physical confrontation that favored raw physical size and aggressive brute strength. You had to run fast, sweat profusely, throw hard, and physically fight for your survival. After the bow, hunting became an intellectual game of supreme stealth, spatial geometry, and patient observation. You could now crouch silently in dense tall grass, completely invisible to the eyes of your prey. You could pull the string back to your cheek, holding a lethal amount of stored kinetic energy right beside your own ear, and hold your breath until the perfect moment. You didn't need a massive, muscular frame to be a successful hunter anymore. A small, lightweight human with good hand-eye coordination and spatial awareness could drop a massive animal from 50 yards away without ever breaking a sweat. The bow leveled the physical playing field among early humans. It allowed human intelligence, fine motor control, and tool design to completely replace raw muscle mass. Is it any surprise that human brains began to favor subtle strategic planning over simple physical dominance? Furthermore, archaeologist John Shea has pointed out that projectile technology like the bow fundamentally altered human social dynamics and group survival. When a group of hunters carries bows, they could defend a campsite or a water source from a distance, forcing rival predators or competing groups to keep their distance. It created a protective bubble around the human tribe. This safety zone allowed young children, elders, and mothers to live with significantly less fear of sudden predatory attacks. With lower mortality rates from hunting accidents and predator encounters, human populations began to stabilize and expand. The extra time and safety afforded by long-range weapons gave your ancestors the freedom to sit around campfires, share complex spoken languages, transmit cultural knowledge, and create symbolic art on cave walls. The bow did not just kill animals. It created the safe social space required for human culture to flourish. This revolutionary invention altered human history forever. With the bow and arrow, your ancestors could hunt solitary game in thick, impenetrable forests where spears were completely useless. They could venture into new ecosystems, adapted to cold tundras, dense jungles, and arid deserts. The bow was so wildly successful that once it was perfected, it spread across every continent on Earth, appearing in Africa, Eurasia, and eventually crossing ancient land bridges into the Americas. It became the ultimate human technology, remaining the dominant long-range weapon for tens of thousands of years until the widespread adoption of gunpowder. Every time you watch a modern athlete shoot a target, or even when you look at the complex mechanics of modern car suspension systems, you are looking at the direct lineage of that ancient prehistoric breakthrough. Your species learned to store invisible physical energy in inanimate objects, bending nature to serve human intention. Think back to where you are sitting right now in your comfortable modern environment. You live in a world where almost every object you interact with relies on stored, unseen potential energy. Your smartphone stores electrical potential inside a chemical lithium battery, waiting silently for your finger to touch the screen. Your automobile stores chemical potential inside liquid fuel, waiting for a spark to unleash thousands of micro-explosions. Your entire modern civilization is built on the concept of multi-step manufacturing and delayed gratification, taking raw materials from completely different corners of the Earth and combining them into intricate systems that project human intention across vast distances. None of this modern world would exist if your ancient ancestors had remained content with throwing heavy wooden sticks. They had to look at a curved branch, a piece of braided cord, and a sharp quartz point, and see something that did not yet exist in the physical realm. They had to imagine stored energy before they could ever hold it in their hands.